He was a Black War veteran, injured in combat and barely able to walk. Yet the judge demanded he stand or face punishment in a courtroom built to uphold justice. What happens when justice forgets its own heroes? The rain hadn't let up all morning. It slid in cold sheets across the city sidewalks, soaking the streets and hammering the metal roof of the old bus stop where Malcolm Reed sat motionless. He didn't flinch when a gust of wind cut under the shelter. He barely blinked. His military dress uniform, faded at the shoulders but carefully pressed, clung to him like something sacred. At 38, Malcolm carried the weight of 2 combat tours and more scars than anyone could see. His leg, bound in a rigid black brace, stretched stiffly out in front of him. Crutches rested against the bench like worn rifles laid down after a long march. He looked up at the courthouse across the street, tall windows, heavy gray stone doors. That building hadn't been made for men like him. Not the broken. Not the forgotten. He shifted slightly, wincing at the sharp pull in his lower back. It had taken him nearly 2 hours to get here. The subway elevator was out again. The bus ramp hadn't worked yesterday, and the nearest drop-off point for paratransit was 3 blocks too far to walk. He tried to come before 3 times, but the system made it nearly impossible for a man who moved like him. Today, he forced it anyway, because he had to. The charge, contempt of court. Missed appearances over a few unpaid parking fines. Fines he'd tried to contest but never got the chance. His phone buzzed. A message from his sister, Jasmine, just get through it. I'll meet you after. Malcolm allowed a faint smile. Jasmine, a night shift nurse with tired eyes and a voice that always steadied him, had stayed up past her shift just to be there. She always did. He exhaled and rose carefully, leaning into his crutches. One step, then another. Pain throbbed with every movement, but he'd learned not to fight it, just move through it. People passed without noticing. No one offered help. No one held the door. He pulled it open himself and stepped inside. The courthouse swallowed him whole, echoing with the tap of his crutches and the soft slap of wet boots on tile. The air smelled like paper, varnish, and something colder underneath. What Malcolm didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this building wasn't just unwelcoming. It was about to prove it had never truly seen him at all. The courtroom was warmer than the rain-soaked street outside, but it felt cold. Malcolm paused just inside the doors, letting his eyes adjust to the dim wood-paneled walls and flickering overhead lights. It reminded him of base briefing rooms overseas, formal, rigid, indifferent. Except back then people looked you in the eye. Now no one looked up. Judge Eleanor Whitman sat high behind the bench, her black robe pressed sharp, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun that didn't dare shift. She was known in the city, feared even, a former military wife turned courtroom iron wall. They said she respected soldiers, but only the ones who didn't stumble. Malcolm's name was called. He moved slowly down the aisle toward the defendant's table, his crutches clicking softly against the marble floor. Every eye that bothered to follow him quickly looked away again. At the prosecutor's table sat Andrew Voss, young, polished, and proud of it. He didn't stand when Malcolm arrived, just gave a lazy glance over his file and smirked. "Mr. Reed," Judge Whitman began, voice clipped and firm. "You stand before this court charged with contempt for failure to appear 3 times. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I tried." She raised one hand sharp as a blade. "This is not a place for excuses." He swallowed. His mouth was dry. His back ached. "I served in Afghanistan. You were issued summons," she snapped. "You ignored them. I couldn't walk the distance. The transit stops weren't accessible. The elevators. You found a way today, didn't you?" she said. He froze. "I find no satisfaction in disobedience wrapped in patriotism," she continued coolly. "Service does not exempt one from accountability." Andrew Voss didn't speak. He didn't need to. The smirk on his face said it all. To him, this wasn't a courtroom. It was a conveyor belt. Malcolm glanced at the jury box, mostly white, middle-aged. One man looked half asleep. A woman in the back rubbed her temples. No one met his eyes. In the gallery, someone coughed. Others scrolled quietly through their phones. And that was the moment Malcolm felt it. Not anger, not shame, just small. Like he didn't belong, even though he bled for the right to stand there. He shifted in his seat, back straight despite the pain. Voice low but steady. "I didn't come here today to be excused," he said. I came because I still believe in what this place is supposed to mean. The silence that followed didn't feel like belief. It felt like dismissal. And for a man who had once stood tall in uniform, that was the deepest wound of all. Judge Whitman leaned slightly forward in her chair. Before I issue your sentence, Mr. Reed, she said, you will stand, unassisted. The room shifted. Even Voss blinked in surprise. To show respect to this court, she added. Malcolm stared at her. For a moment, he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. Your Honor, he began, voice calm but uncertain. Her tone sharpened. You wore the uniform. I assume you remember what respect looks like. His fingers tightened around the grip of his crutches. He said nothing. His leg, the one reconstructed after a roadside bomb outside Kandahar, had been swelling since morning. The doctor had warned him standing unsupported could tear through what little stability he had left. But the judge didn't blink. She stared at him like he owed her something. Across the room, someone cleared their throat. Voss glanced down at his file and shifted uncomfortably. Malcolm took a breath. Then another. And then he began to rise. He pushed the crutches aside. One clattered to the floor. He placed both hands on the edge of the table, bracing himself. Then, slowly, painfully, he lifted. His right leg strained beneath him. His left shook violently. He straightened his back. Shoulders squared the way he'd been trained. For a few excruciating seconds he stood. The room fell silent. No one moved. Judge Whitman remained motionless. Then his knee gave. His body crumpled. His hip hit first, then his shoulder, then the sharp crack of his head against the polished floor. A woman gasped. A crutch skidded across the room. Malcolm, someone shouted. The courtroom doors burst open. Jasmine Reed, breathless, rain-soaked, in her nurse's scrubs, ran forward. Don't move, she cried. Don't move. He groaned softly, eyes fluttering. One hand twitched. You don't have to, Jasmine whispered, falling to her knees beside him. It's over. You don't have to prove anything. But Malcolm wasn't trying to prove anything. He just didn't know how to stay down. He had fought to stand his whole life in VA waiting rooms, in job interviews where they saw the limp before the man. To him, standing wasn't ceremony. It was survival. Help him, someone muttered. The bailiff hesitated. Judge Whitman didn't speak. He moved anyway. Kneeling beside Malcolm, he placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Sergeant, don't force it. Let us help. I'm okay, Malcolm whispered. You're not, Jasmine said softly. And you don't need to be. Not for them. The room shifted. Jurors looked down. A man shook his head. Even Voss had lost his smirk. And the judge, she still hadn't spoken. Her eyes locked on Malcolm. Something in them changed. Not softened. Fractured. Jasmine's voice filled the silence. He served this country, she said. And now this. This is what you call justice. No answer came. Just the sound of Malcolm's shallow breath. And the rain pounding against the tall windows like something that refused to be ignored. Then someone stood. A tall black man, gray in his beard, one empty sleeve tucked into his coat. A veteran. Then another. And another. A wall of veterans rose, row by row. Quiet, deliberate defiance. Some leaned on canes. One wiped his eyes. Even the jury began to shift. A woman clutched her service pin. A man with a crew cut stood with watery eyes. And then an elderly black woman stepped into the aisle. Simple coat. Straight back. 6 small medals pinned to her chest. My father died in Korea, she said, her voice trembling. And now you shame his son. Judge Whitman froze. The woman stepped back. Silence grew heavier. Behind her, dozens stood veterans, civilians, a mother holding a folded flag. And at the center of it all, on the floor, was Malcolm Reed. Jasmine knelt beside him, whispering. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching. A witness. A warning. Judge Whitman shifted. She wasn't used to the silence. It wasn't hers anymore. Slowly she stood. She stepped down from her bench. Her robe rustled. She crossed the floor, step by step. And then she knelt. Before Malcolm Reed. Her knees creaked. But she didn't flinch. She looked at him. And finally she said, I failed you. I failed what justice is supposed to mean. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She knew better. I saw a name. A number. Not the man. Not the brother. Not the soldier. Malcolm turned his head, slowly, raised his hand and rested it on her shoulder. No words, just a trembling palm resting where judgment once sat, because power had finally knelt before pain. It started with a single clip, a veteran trying to stand, a judge removing her robe. By the end of the day, it had been viewed over 5 million times. The hashtags exploded. He couldn't stand. Veterans spoke out. Civilians listened. The Reed bill passed Congress in weeks. No court could compel a disabled veteran to stand. Law schools rewrote curricula. And in a quiet town, a bronze statue was unveiled. A soldier kneeling, one hand gripping crutches. The plaque read, "They didn't see you, but we do now." Elijah didn't say anything that day. He didn't need to. He stood beside the statue, placed a hand on the crutches, and closed his eyes. And when he opened them, he whispered, "I still see them. I still stand." The wind stirred, and the country slowly, finally remembered how